The relentless sun beat down on Ashen Darrow's back as he trudged through the endless wasteland. Around him, the ruins of what had once been a mighty civilization stretched toward the horizon. Crumbling towers, half-buried war machines, and the occasional glint of metal that might be worth something to the right buyer. After 5 years as a scavenger, Ashen had developed an eye for valuable junk. It was a lonely existence, but it suited him. The less people around, the fewer chances to make another mistake. The fewer chances to get someone else killed. Wiping sweat from his brow, Ashen approached a particularly promising pile of debris. The remnants of what might have been a royal complex or government building lay scattered across the sand. Its once magnificent architecture, now just another graveyard of forgotten technology and broken dreams. The empire that had built it had fallen centuries ago, leaving nothing but dust and fragments for people like him to pick through. Another day, another handful of credits, he muttered to himself, kneeling to examine a twisted piece of metal that might have been part of an ancient generator. His canteen was nearly empty, and the settlement was still a day's journey away. He needed to find something worthwhile soon or risk another night without proper shelter. As he shifted a collapsed support beam, something caught his eye, the glint of metal, different from a usual technological scrap. Ashen reached down and pulled what appeared to be a sword from beneath the rubble. It was ancient, its blade pitted with rust, the hilt ornate but tarnished beyond recognition. Primitive, he said with a sigh. Probably ceremonial. Might fetch a few credits from a collector. He brushed his hand across the blade, wiping away layers of caked dust and sand, hoping to reveal some marker or insignia that might increase its value. As his fingers swept across the corroded metal, something impossible happened. The sword trembled in his grasp. A faint blue glow emanated from strange symbols along the blade's edge, symbols that hadn't been visible moments before. And then, clear as day, a voice spoke directly into his mind. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." Ashen dropped the sword as if it had burned him, stumbling backward and nearly falling. He looked around wildly, certain someone must be playing a trick on him, but there was no one in sight for miles. "Great," he muttered. "Now I'm hallucinating. Must be the heat." Still, his hand trembled as he reached for his canteen, taking a careful sip of the precious water. When he looked back at the sword, the glow had dimmed but not disappeared entirely. Strange characters flickered along the blade like dying embers. "I'm not a king," he said to no one in particular. "I'm barely even a person anymore." Despite his better judgment, Ashen reached for the sword again. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, images flashed through his mind. A magnificent throne room, armies marching under unfamiliar banners, a crown being placed upon someone's head. The visions were gone as quickly as they came, leaving him dizzy and confused. In the distance, movement caught his eye, a flicker of light from within the deeper ruins, then another. Someone else was out there, searching the ruins just as he was. But something told Ashen they weren't looking for scrap metal. He should leave the sword, walk away, find something else to sell. But as he stared at the ancient blade, something tugged at his memory, a dream, perhaps, or a story heard long ago. Against all reason, he wrapped the sword in a piece of cloth and secured it to his pack. "Just until I reach the settlement," he told himself. "Then I'll sell it to the highest bidder and forget all about talking swords and lost kings." But deep in his mind, a voice that might have been the sword's, or might have been his own buried memories, whispered that he was lying to himself. As Ashen journeyed deeper into the heart of the ancient ruins, the landscape changed. The scattered debris gave way to more intact structures, broken but still recognizable as the remnants of a once great city. Massive columns lay toppled across wide avenues. Statues, worn faceless by centuries of wind-blown sand, stood guard over empty plazas. And everywhere, carved into stone and metal alike, were symbols similar to those that had glowed on the sword's blade. The ruins seemed to grow more intact the farther he went, as though the heart of the city had somehow resisted destruction better than its outskirts. By midday, Ashen found himself walking through what must have been the central district. A massive structure dominated the skyline, a palace or temple whose towers still reached defiantly toward the sky, though half of the complex had collapsed into rubble. On the walls of still-standing buildings, the carvings became more elaborate, depicting figures in flowing robes bearing swords identical to the one Ashen carried. One particularly well-preserved frieze showed a crowned figure holding the blade aloft, while others bowed before them. Below it, strange characters were carved with precision. "The one who bears the Kingmaker shall unite the scattered," a voice said from behind him. Ashen whirled, drawing his blaster from its holster in one fluid motion. Standing 20 paces away was a woman unlike any he had seen before. Her skin had a faint blue tinge, her eyes entirely black without visible pupils. She wore armor of an unfamiliar design, plates that seemed to shift color with her movements, and at her side hung a weapon that resembled a cross between a spear and an energy rifle. "Who are you?" Ashen demanded, keeping his blaster trained on her. "I am Alira, Sentinel of the Exiled," she replied, making no move toward her weapon. "The more important question is, who are you, human, and why do you carry the sacred blade of our ancestors?" Ashen didn't lower his weapon. "Found it in the ruins. I'm a scavenger. That's what I do. Find things, sell things." "A scavenger," Alira repeated, her expression hardening. "Yet the Kingmaker glows at your touch. It has been silent for centuries, awaiting the return of the royal bloodline." "Look, I don't know anything about bloodlines or talking swords," Ashen said, though the blade seemed to warm at his side, as if in disagreement. "I'm just passing through." Alira's gaze was penetrating. "Draw the blade." "I don't think." "Draw it," she insisted. "Prove you are merely a scavenger, and I will let you pass." Reluctantly, Ashen holstered his blaster and unwrapped the sword. The moment it was free of its coverings, the symbols along its length blazed to life, casting blue light across the ancient stones. Alira gasped, taking a step backward. "It cannot be," she whispered. "After all this time?" "It's just reflecting the sunlight," Ashen said weakly, though he knew it wasn't true. Alira approached slowly, her earlier hostility replaced by something like reverence. "The blade recognizes you. It has awakened for you." "I am nobody," Ashen insisted. "The Kingmaker disagrees," Alira replied, "and it has never been wrong." Before Ashen could argue further, Alira dropped to one knee, pressing a fist to her chest. "The signs are clear. You must come with me." "Where?" Ashen asked, suddenly wary. "To my people, the last survivors of those who once served your ancestors. They have waited generations for this moment." Ashen wanted to refuse, to drop the sword and run as far as he could. But the blade pulsed in his hand, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he felt as though he was approaching an answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. "Lead the way," he said finally, "but I'm not promising anything." Alira led Ashen through a complex network of ruins, following paths that seemed random but clearly held meaning for her. Occasionally she would stop and press her hand to a seemingly ordinary wall, causing hidden doorways to slide open or barriers to lower. "Your people built in layers," she explained as they descended a staircase that had appeared from nowhere. "Surface, subsurface, deep chambers. When the fall came, those of us who survived retreated to the depths." The staircase opened into a vast underground chamber illuminated by strips of light that Ashen recognized as ancient tech, emergency systems that had somehow remained operational for centuries. Within the chamber, structures had been built using salvaged materials from the ruins above. And moving among those structures were dozens of people who resembled Alira, the same blue-tinged skin, the same pupilless eyes. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Within moments, they were surrounded. Some of the exiles gazed at Ashen with hope, others with unmistakable hostility. "What have you brought us, Alira?" demanded a tall male with elaborate markings across his face. "Another human to betray our trust?" "The Kingmaker has awakened, Zameth," Alira replied, gesturing to the sword that still glowed faintly in Ashen's hand. "It has chosen." Murmurs swept through the gathering crowd. An elderly female pushed her way forward, leaning heavily on a staff fashioned from what looked like part of an ancient war machine. "Let me see," she commanded, her voice strong despite her apparent age. Ashen hesitantly held out the sword. The elderly woman didn't touch it, but studied it intently, her eyes narrowing. "The glow is genuine," she announced finally. "But that proves nothing. Humans betrayed us once. Their emperor promised alliance, then ordered our extermination when we refused to give up our secrets. That was centuries ago," Alira argued. "And they have only grown more brutal since," Xamath countered. "We should kill this one now and return the blade to the sanctuary." The crowd seemed divided, some nodding in agreement with Xamath, others looking uncertainly between him and Alira. "There is a way to be certain," the elderly woman said. "The trial of recognition. If he truly carries the old blood, the Guardian will know." Xamath scoffed. "The Guardian hasn't responded to anyone in generations." "Then he has nothing to fear," the old woman replied with a thin smile. "Does he?" All eyes turned to Ashen. "What's this trial?" he asked, not liking the sound of it. "At the heart of our sanctuary lies a Guardian, a construct from the days before the fall," Alira explained. "It was programmed to recognize the royal bloodline and their right to rule. If you are who the sword believes you to be, the Guardian will acknowledge you. And if I'm not," Alira's expression was grave, "then it will eliminate you as an imposter." "Wonderful," Ashen muttered. "I don't suppose I can decline." "You can leave the sword and go," Xamath said eagerly. "We won't stop you." Ashen looked at the blade in his hand. The rational part of him screamed to drop it and run. But something deeper, something he couldn't explain, made that impossible. "Fine," he said at last. "Let's meet this Guardian." The central chamber of the sanctuary was unlike anything Ashen had ever seen. Ancient technology and stranger elements combined in ways that defied his understanding. At the center stood a massive construct, part machine, part something else, that vaguely resembled a humanoid figure seated on a throne. Its surface was covered in the same symbols that decorated the sword, and its eyes, if the glowing orbs embedded in its face could be called eyes, were dark and lifeless. "The Guardian has been dormant since the last of the royal line fell," the elderly woman, who had introduced herself as Seer the Lana, explained. "It will awaken for the trial." "What do I do?" Ashen asked, his mouth dry with apprehension. "Present the blade," Alira instructed. "The rest will happen as it must." The exiles gathered in a circle, leaving Ashen alone in the center with the Guardian. Taking a deep breath, he approached the massive construct and held out the sword. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like ancient stones grinding together, the Guardian's eyes illuminated with the same blue glow as the sword. Its massive head tilted down to regard Ashen. Identification protocol initiated. It intoned in a voice that seemed to bypass Ashen's ears and speak directly to his mind. "Present royal signet for genetic verification." Ashen looked helplessly at Alira. "I don't have any signet." Before she could respond, the sword in his hand pulsed. Acting on instinct, Ashen raised it higher. A beam of light shot from the Guardian's eyes, scanning the blade from hilt to tip. "Alternative verification accepted," the Guardian announced. Initiating secondary protocol. Without warning, a mechanical arm shot out from the Guardian's body, seizing Ashen's wrist. Pain lanced through his arm as something sharp pierced his skin. He tried to pull away, but the Guardian's grip was immovable. Blood sample acquired. Analyzing genetic markers. The assembled exiles watched in tense silence as the Guardian processed whatever data it had collected. Finally, its eyes flashed brighter. Royal markers identified. Genetic memory transfer protocol initiated. The world around Ashen disappeared. Suddenly he was someone else, a tall, regal figure standing before armies. He felt the weight of a crown, heard himself giving commands in a language he somehow understood despite never having learned it. He saw betrayal, felt the agony of wounds, experienced the desperation of ordering trusted advisors to flee with his infant child as the palace burned around them. These weren't his memories, but they poured into his mind as if they had always been there, merely forgotten until now. When the vision cleared, Ashen found himself on his knees, the sword still clutched in his hand, its glow brighter than ever. "The Guardian has spoken," Seer the Lana announced, her voice filled with awe. "The blood of King Alaric flows in his veins. The Kingmaker has found its master once more." The exiles began to kneel, first Elira, then the elders, and finally, reluctantly, even Zameth. But Ashen barely noticed. His mind was reeling from the flood of memories. Memories that belonged to someone who had died centuries before he was born. "I'm not a king," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. "I can't be what you want me to be." "The choice is not yours to make," Delana replied gently. "The blade has awakened. The Guardian has confirmed. You are the heir to the shattered throne, whether you wish to be or not." As the exiles guided him back to their main living area, Ashen felt like a man caught in a dream. They treated him with a deference that made him profoundly uncomfortable, offering him their best food and drink, preparing a private chamber decorated with salvaged royal emblems. Left alone at last, Ashen stared at the sword that had so thoroughly upended his life in the span of a single day. The blade continued to glow softly, and when he closed his eyes, fragments of King Alaric's memories drifted through his mind. "I'm not him," Ashen told the sword. "I'm not a leader. I'm a deserter, a scavenger. I've spent years running from responsibility, not seeking it out." The sword, of course, didn't answer, at least not in words. But the glow pulsed slightly, as if in disagreement. A soft knock at the door interrupted his one-sided argument. Elira entered, carrying a bundle of cloth. "These belong to your ancestor," she said, placing the bundle on a table. "They have been preserved for the day of return." Ashen unwrapped the package to find a medallion bearing the same symbol that appeared on the sword's hilt. "I can't take this. It is already yours," Elira replied simply, "as is the responsibility that comes with it." "You don't understand," Ashen said, his frustration boiling over. "I'm not a hero. The last time people depended on me, they died. All of them." Elira regarded him steadily. "Tell me, perhaps it was the shared memories of Alaric making him reckless, or perhaps he was simply tired of carrying the burden alone." Whatever the reason, Ashen found himself speaking of things he had never told another living soul. "I was a commander in the Frontier Corps. My unit was sent to suppress an uprising on a mining colony. The intelligence said they were violent extremists with stolen military-grade weapons." He paused, the familiar pain washing over him. "But when we got there, we found civilians, miners protesting unsafe conditions. Someone gave the order to fire anyway. I hesitated, tried to countermand it, but it was too late. 38 civilians died." Ashen's hands clenched into fists. "When I reported what happened, my superior told me to classify it as a justified response to armed insurrection. I refused. The next day, my unit was sent on a routine patrol into contested territory. We were ambushed. I was the only survivor." He looked up at Elira, his eyes haunted. "It wasn't an accident. We were sent there to die because I wouldn't lie about a massacre. So I deserted. Couldn't save my unit, couldn't bring justice to those miners. What kind of king would that make me?" Elira was silent for a long moment. "One who understands the cost of failure," she said finally. "One who knows the value of truth, even when it is painful. Those are not the qualities of a poor leader, Ashendaro." "It doesn't matter," he said. "I'm not claiming any throne. Once I figure out what's happening here, I'm leaving." "Perhaps," Elira conceded. "But first, you should hear the full story of what happened to your ancestors' empire. You are not the only one shaped by betrayal." As night fell over the ruined city, the exiles gathered in their central meeting area. At Thalana's direction, their historians recounted the fall of King Alaric's empire, a tale of treachery that resonated painfully with Ashen's own experience. The empire of Alaric the Benevolent stretched from the Crimson Mountains to the Glass Sea. An elder named Corvus began. For 3 generations, the royal line ruled with wisdom and compassion, using the power of the Kingmaker to maintain peace among the diverse peoples of the realm. The sword at Ashen's side seemed to warm at the mention of its name. But General Morix, commander of the royal armies, grew ambitious. He planted seeds of discord, convincing provincial governors that the king planned to strip them of autonomy. He whispered to our people that humans would eventually turn on us as they had on other non-human species. Corvus's voice grew bitter. When his web of lies was complete, he struck. Half the army followed him in rebellion. The royal palace was attacked without warning. King Alaric fought bravely, but he was betrayed by those he trusted most. The king's final act was to entrust his infant heir to our ancestors, the Lana continued. They fled with the child and the kingmaker, while Alaric held off Morix's forces. The king fell, and Morix declared himself emperor. But his victory was short-lived, another elder added. Without the kingmaker, he could not unite the fractured empire. The provinces fell into civil war. Within a generation, the great empire was reduced to warring states, and then to ruins. Only Morix remained. Remain? Ashen interrupted. You speak as if he's still alive. A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Finally, Delana spoke. Morix discovered secrets in the ancient archives, technologies of life extension that were forbidden in Alaric's time. He has sustained himself for centuries, ruling over a small but formidable army, always searching for the kingmaker, believing it would allow him to rebuild the empire under his control. That's impossible, Ashen protested. No one lives that long. Look around you, Aliris said quietly. We are surrounded by the impossible. My people live twice the span of humans, yet even the eldest among us was born long. After the fall, only Morix remains from that era, kept alive by technologies that corrupt body and soul alike. If what you say is true, Ashen said slowly, then this Morix is still out there, still searching for this sword. Corvus nodded grimly. And now that the Kingmaker has awakened, he will sense it. He has agents everywhere, even among those who appear to be simple scavengers. The implication was clear. Ashen's discovery of the sword had likely already been reported. How long do we have? Days, perhaps, Delana answered. Hours, if he was already nearby. Then we need to prepare, Ashen said, the tactical training of his military days surfacing automatically. Fortify the sanctuary, establish surveillance, inventory weapons and supplies. Only when he noticed the exiles staring at him did he realize he had fallen naturally into the role of commander. He felt his face flush. That's what I would suggest. It's your decision. No, Alira said with the ghost of smile. I believe it is yours, your majesty. Before Ashen could object to the title, a young exile burst into the chamber, his face taut with fear. Sentinels report movement at the northern approach, he gasped. Many figures advancing in formation. They bear the mark of Morix. So soon, Delana murmured. He must have had forces nearby, Corvus said. Perhaps hunting for the sanctuary itself. The gathered exiles looked to Ashen, expectation and fear mingling in their expressions. The weight of their gaze was suffocating. He wanted to tell them to look elsewhere, that he was no king, no savior. But the memory of his fallen comrades flashed through his mind, alongside newer memories. Alaric's last stand, his desperate hope that his heir would someday return to reclaim what was lost. How many fighters can you muster? Ashen asked, his decision made. For the next few hours, the sanctuary was a flurry of activity. The exiles, though long isolated, had maintained military traditions passed down through generations. They moved with discipline, preparing defenses, distributing weapons both ancient and salvaged. Alira, as chief sentinel, commanded the outpost guards, positioning them to provide early warning of the enemy's approach. Ashen found himself working alongside Corvus to analyze the sanctuary's layout, identifying choke points and defensible positions. Your instincts are good, the elder observed as Ashen suggested using collapsed rubble to funnel attackers into prepared kill zones. The blood of Alaric runs true in you. It's not royal blood, Ashen replied. It's military training. I was good at my job before everything went wrong. Perhaps that is why the Kingmaker chose you, Corvus said thoughtfully. Not just because of who your ancestors were, but because of who you are. Before Ashen could respond, Alira returned with troubling news. Morix's forces have established positions surrounding all known exits from the sanctuary, she reported. They have deployed jamming devices to prevent communication with our outermost sentinels. And she hesitated, glancing at Zameth, who had been notably quiet during the preparations. Speak plainly, Ashen urged. Zameth is gone, she said, along with two others who shared his views about humans. A sentry saw them approaching Morix's lines. They were not challenged or fired upon. Traitors, Corvus spat. They mean to bargain with Morix. For their lives, perhaps, Ashen mused. Or for a place in whatever new order Morix plans to establish. What do we do now? Alira asked. The question hung in the air. Everyone present knew the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Zameth knew the sanctuary's defenses, its secret passages, its weaknesses. With that information in Morix's hands, a successful defense seemed increasingly unlikely. The sword at Ashen's side pulsed, almost as if in response to his thoughts. He drew it, studying the glowing symbols along its length. There's something the sword wants to show me, he said, not entirely sure how he knew this. I need to return to the Guardian Chamber. Alone in the presence of the ancient construct, Ashen raised the sword. Show me, he commanded. Show me how to defeat Morix. The Guardian's eyes flared to life, and a beam of energy connected with the blade. Once again, Ashen was plunged into memories not his own, but this time they were more focused, more specific. He saw King Alaric standing before a vast console, the Kingmaker raised high, its power somehow interfacing with the ancient technology. He heard words in that strange language that he somehow understood, saw emergency protocols activated, defenses deployed. When the vision faded, Ashen knew what he had to do. Hurrying back to the main chamber, he found Alira and the others waiting anxiously. There's a way, he told them. The city itself has defenses, automated systems that have lain dormant since the fall. King Alaric activated them during the final siege. With the Kingmaker, I can do the same. After all this time, Corvus asked skeptically. The power systems would have failed centuries ago. The sword is a key and a power source, Ashen explained. It can reactivate the city's heart. But I'll need to reach the central control nexus in what remains of the palace above. That's suicide, Alira objected. Morix's forces control the surface. Not if they're distracted, Ashen countered. We need to split our forces. Most will engage Morix's troops at the eastern entrance. Make them think we're attempting a breakout. Meanwhile, a small team will use the maintenance tunnels to reach the surface near the palace. It was a desperate plan, but no one offered a better alternative. As the exiles prepared for battle, Ashen found himself alone with his thoughts. The sword hummed gently at his side, its presence oddly comforting despite the chaos it had brought to his life. I'm not doing this to claim any throne, he told it. These people deserve a chance to live without fear. That's all. Whether it was his imagination or some genuine response from the ancient blade, Ashen could have sworn it glowed a little brighter at his words. Dawn broke over the ruined city, casting long shadows across the devastated landscape. From their hidden observation point, Ashen and his small team, Alira and 3 of her most trusted sentinels, watched as Morix's forces mobilized to counter the diversionary attack at the eastern entrance. The clash of energy weapons and the shouts of combatants echoed across the ruins. It's working, Alira whispered. They're committing their forces to the east. For now, Ashen replied grimly. We need to move quickly. They slipped from cover to cover, avoiding the occasional patrol as they made their way toward the palace. The massive structure loomed ahead, its remaining towers still impressive despite centuries of decay. The control nexus is in the central chamber, Ashen said, drawing on Alaric's memories. Beneath the throne room. As they approached the palace perimeter, movement caught Ashen's eye. A patrol was heading directly toward their position, but something about their formation seemed off. Take cover, he hissed, pulling Alira behind a fallen column. The patrol passed within meters of their hiding place. At its center walked a figure unlike the others, taller, more commanding, clad in armor that gleamed with an unnatural light. Though his face was hidden behind an ornate helmet, Ashen knew instinctively who he was looking at. "Morix," he breathed. The general paused, turning toward their hiding place as if he had heard Ashen's whisper across the distance. For a heart-stopping moment, Ashen feared they had been discovered. Then Morix continued on, disappearing into the palace entrance. "He's heading for the Nexus," Ashen realized. "He knows what we're planning." "Zameth must have told him," Alyrus said, anger evident in her voice. "What do we do now?" Ashen's mind raced. If Morix reached the control Nexus first, all would be lost. But confronting him directly, with only 4 fighters against his personal guard, seemed like suicide. "We continue," he decided, "but we'll need a new approach. There's a servant's passage that leads directly to the throne room. King Alaric used it to escape during the fall. The passage was exactly where Alaric's memories indicated, a narrow tunnel hidden behind a collapsed wall. Centuries of disuse had left it partially blocked in places, forcing them to squeeze through tight gaps and climb over debris. One of Alyr's sentinels was forced to turn back when they reached a section too narrow for him to pass. Finally, they emerged into the throne room, or what remained of it. The once magnificent chamber was now open to the sky, its roof long since collapsed. The throne itself was barely recognizable, a twisted mass of metal and stone. But the floor beneath it remained intact, and Ashen could see the outline of a hidden door. "There," he whispered, pointing. "The Nexus is below." As they moved toward it, the air seemed to thicken. The sword at Ashen's side pulsed with urgent energy, as if trying to warn him. "We're not alone," Alyrus said, her hand moving to her weapon. "Indeed you are not," came a voice from the shadows. "I've been expecting you, little king." Morix stepped into view, flanked by Zameth and 4 soldiers bearing advanced weapons. The general's appearance was shocking, his face unnaturally smooth despite eyes that spoke of centuries of life, his body a disturbing blend of flesh and technological augmentation. "The last scion of Alaric," Morix said, studying Ashen with unnerving intensity. "I must admit, I expected someone more impressive, and I expected someone less reliant on traitors," Ashen replied, nodding toward Zameth, who had the grace to look away. Morix laughed, the sound hollow and artificial. "Traitors? Or pragmatists? Zameth understands what you do not, that the future belongs to those with the vision to seize it, like you seized it centuries ago." Alyrus spat. "By betraying your king and destroying the empire you claim to serve." "I try to save it," Morix countered. "Alaric was weak, unwilling to use the empire's might to expand our dominion. He spoke of peace while our enemies gathered at our borders. I did what was necessary." "You did what served your ambition," Ashen said, the words coming not entirely from himself, but also from the echoes of Alaric in his mind. "And you failed. The empire fell anyway." Morix's artificial calm cracked slightly. "A temporary setback. With the Kingmaker, I can restore what was lost. The remaining provinces will bend the knee or be destroyed. Order will return." "Order?" Ashen echoed. "You mean tyranny." "I mean survival," Morix snapped. "This world has fallen into chaos without strong leadership. The outer settlements fight among themselves for scraps, while ancient enemies gather strength. The empire must rise again, stronger than before. Under your boot. Under whatever force is necessary," Morix said coldly. "Now, surrender the Kingmaker, and I may let your companions live to serve in the new order." Ashen's hand tightened on the sword's hilt. The blade's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows across the ruined throne room. "You know I can't do that." Morix sighed theatrically. "Then you leave me no choice. Kill them all except for him. I need him alive until the Kingmaker's binding is transferred." What happened next unfolded with dreamlike slowness. Morix's soldiers raised their weapons. Alyra and her sentinels moved to defend Ashen. Zameth, perhaps realizing too late the magnitude of his betrayal, hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Ashen acted. He raised the Kingmaker high, its light blazing like a newborn star. Words in the ancient language poured from his lips, words he had never learned but somehow knew. "Nexus protocol override." Guardian Defense Activation. Authorization. Heir of Alaric. The floor beneath the throne shifted, panels sliding apart to reveal the control nexus, a pulsing core of energy and ancient technology. Before Morix could react, Ashen plunged the Kingmaker into the center of the nexus. Power surged through the sword into Ashen's body. It was excruciating, yet somehow exhilarating. Through the pain, he felt the city awakening around them, dormant systems coming to life, ancient defenses stirring from centuries of slumber. Morix screamed in rage, lunging forward only to be thrown back by a pulse of energy from the nexus. His soldiers fired, but their weapons suddenly failed, power draining away as the city's systems reasserted control over all technology within its boundaries. The floor trembled beneath them. Throughout the ruined city, mechanical guardians were awakening, constructs similar to the one in the Exile Sanctuary, but designed for combat. Ashen could sense them through his connection to the Kingmaker, could feel them moving toward the palace, converging on Morix's scattered forces. "What have you done?" Morix snarled, his voice distorted by rage and fear. "What Alaric would have done," Ashen replied, his voice strangely calm despite the power coursing through him. "Protected his people." Elira seized the moment of confusion to attack, her energy spear cutting through one of Morix's soldiers. Her remaining sentinel engaged another. Zamith stood frozen, caught between loyalties, until Morix turned on him with mechanical fury. "Useless traitor," the general hissed, a concealed blade extending from his augmented arm. Before anyone could intervene, he drove it into Zamith's chest. The exile fell, eyes wide with shock and something like understanding. "I was wrong," he gasped, looking not at Morix but at Ashen. "He is not the future." Then his eyes dimmed forever. Morix's remaining soldiers fell quickly to Elira and her sentinel, but the general himself was a far more formidable opponent. Centuries of technological enhancement had made him something beyond human, his movements impossibly fast, his strength unnatural. He lunged at Ashen, his augmented body crackling with energy that seemed to counter the Kingmaker's influence. "The throne is mine by right of conquest," he roared. "I will not be denied by a scavenger with borrowed memories." Ashen tried to pull the sword from the nexus, but it remained fixed in place, still channeling power throughout the city. Defenseless, he barely managed to dodge Morix's first strike, feeling the rush of air as the general's blade sliced within millimeters of his throat. Elira threw herself between them, her spear meeting Morix's blade in a shower of sparks. They fought with blinding speed, but Morix's enhanced reflexes gave him an unmistakable advantage. Within moments, he had disarmed her and thrown her hard against a fallen column. She slumped to the ground, dazed or worse. "Now, little king," Morix said, advancing on Ashen. "Let's end this farce." Trapped between Morix and the Nexus, Ashen felt a strange calm descend over him. The memories of Alaric were stronger than ever, flowing through him alongside the city's power. But they weren't controlling him. They were guiding him, showing him possibilities. "You're right about one thing, Morix," he said. "This does end now." As the general attacked, Ashen didn't try to evade. Instead, he stepped into the blow, catching Morix's arm with both hands. The contact completed a circuit. Ashen, still connected to the Kingmaker and through it to the city systems, became a conduit. Power surged from the Nexus, through Ashen, and into Morix's cybernetic body. The general screamed, his augmentations overloading, circuits bursting beneath his artificial skin. He struggled to break free, but Ashen held on with a strength born of desperation and something more, the resolve that had been building in him since he first heard those words. "Welcome back, Your Majesty. The city remembers you, General," Ashen said through gritted teeth. "It remembers your betrayal." With a final surge of power, Morix's systems failed catastrophically. The light in his eyes flickered and died, and the body that had been sustained for centuries through forbidden technology crumbled like the ancient ruins around them. The moment Morix fell, the connection between Ashen and the Nexus eased. He staggered back, suddenly exhausted, as the Kingmaker slid free from the control interface. Catching the sword before it could fall, he turned to find Illyra rising unsteadily to her feet. "Is it over?" she asked, clutching her side where Morix's blow had landed. Ashen nodded, too drained for words. Together, they made their way to a shattered window overlooking the city. Outside, Morix's abandoned forces were in disarray, some fleeing, others surrendering to the exiles and the mechanical guardians now patrolling the ruins. "Your ancestors' empire is avenged," Illyra said quietly. "What happens now, Your Majesty?" The title still felt wrong to Ashen, yet somehow less alien than it had before. The memories of Alaric had settled in his mind, no longer intrusive but integrated, a part of his heritage, not his identity. "Now we rebuild," he said, his gaze sweeping over the ruins that suddenly seemed less like a graveyard and more like a foundation. Not an empire, but something new, something better. In the days that followed, the sanctuary became a center of activity. With Morix gone and his forces scattered, the exiles began to emerge from hiding. They moved through the ruins with a new purpose, identifying structures that could be salvaged, systems that could be restored. The Kingmaker, its task complete, had dimmed to a gentle glow. It remained at Ashen's side, a symbol of his heritage, but no longer the burning beacon it had been during the crisis. The Guardian in the sanctuary had resumed its dormant state, though the mechanical defenders throughout the city remained vigilant, protecting the emerging community from threats. A week after Morix's fall, Ashen stood on a balcony of the partially restored palace, watching the sunset. The sword hung at his side, a comfortable weight. Footsteps behind him announced Illyra's arrival. "The council is assembled," she said. "They're waiting for you." Ashen took a deep breath. "I'm still not sure this is right." "Which part?" Illyra asked. "The reconstruction? The alliance with the outer settlements? Or your role in it all?" "All of it," he admitted. "I'm not Alaric. I'm not even sure who Ashen Darrow is anymore." Illyra's expression softened. "Perhaps that's the point. You aren't bound by who you were or who your ancestor was. You can choose who you will be." When Ashen entered the council chamber, once a grand reception hall, now cleared of debris and furnished with salvaged chairs around a makeshift table, he was greeted with respectful nods. Around the table sat the elders of the exiles, representatives from several nearby settlements who had cautiously accepted invitations to discuss alliance, and even a few former soldiers from Morix's army who had chosen to remain. Seer the Lana, looking frielier yet somehow more vibrant than when Ashen had first met her, gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. "The council awaits your guidance, King Ashen." He didn't correct the title this time, though he still felt unworthy of it. Instead, he remained standing, the Kingmaker at his side. "I'm not here to rule," he said clearly. The days of emperors and absolute monarchs led to Morix and the fall. "I won't repeat that mistake." Murmurs circulated around the table, some confused, others approving. "What do you propose?" asked one of the settlement representatives. "A council like this one, but permanent," Ashen replied. "Representatives from all communities in the region, making decisions together. The exiles with their knowledge of the ancient ways, the settlements with their experience of survival, even those who served Morix but chose a better path." "In your role?" Corvus asked. Ashen's hand rested on the Kingmaker's hilt. "I'll serve as guardian, I suppose. Not a king, not a ruler, but a protector. I'll use what I've learned from Alaric and from my own experiences to help where I can. But the decisions should be made by all, not imposed by one." He could sense disapproval from some of the more traditional exiles, but the Lana was nodding slowly. "The Kingmaker chose wisely," she said. "Alaric would approve of this path. It honors his memory while acknowledging that times have changed." "Then let us begin," Ashen said, finally taking his seat, not at the head of the table as intended, but at its side as one voice among many. The discussions lasted well into the night, passionate debates about security, resource allocation, technology sharing, and dozens of other concerns. It wasn't easy, and several times it seemed as though the fragile alliance might fracture before it had truly formed. But each time, common ground was eventually found. As the meeting finally adjourned in the early hours of the morning, Ashen remained seated, contemplating the Kingmaker. Elira, who had observed the proceedings in silence, approached him. "You surprised them," she said. "Many expected you to claim absolute authority." "That's what Morix would have done," Ashen replied. "I'm trying to be better than my mistakes, not repeat them." "In your past? The guilt you carried when you arrived here?" Ashen considered the question. The memories of his fallen comrades, of the miners killed in that tragic operation, were still painful. But somehow the weight of them had shifted. "I'll never forget," he said finally. "But maybe I can honor their memory by building something worthwhile. By making sure power is never again concentrated in the hands of those who would misuse it." Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the ruined city, a city that, for the first time in centuries, hummed with the possibility of renewal. The Kingmaker glowed softly in response to the growing light, its ancient purpose fulfilled not through conquest or dominion, but through the promise of a new beginning. In the months that followed, the settlement around the palace grew. The ancient technology awakened by the Kingmaker provided the foundation: power systems, water purification, defenses, while the knowledge and skills of the diverse inhabitants built upon it. Buildings were cleared and restored, gardens planted in courtyards that had seen nothing but dust for generations. The council evolved into a functioning government, with representatives rotating every few months to ensure no single faction gained too much influence. Disagreements were frequent but rarely escalated, as all remembered the cost of the empire's fall. Ashen found his place not as a ruler, but as a guide. His connection to the Kingmaker gave him insights into the ancient systems, while his military experience helped organize the settlement's defenses. He trained a corps of guardians, humans and exiles working side by side, to protect not only their community, but also the smaller settlements that had joined their alliance. A year after his fateful discovery of the rusted blade, Ashen stood atop the highest remaining tower of the palace, surveying what had once been ruins and was now becoming a city once more. Elira joined him, as she often did during these moments of reflection. "A trader from the eastern provinces arrived today," she informed him. "He says word of our community has spread. Others wish to join the alliance. They're welcome if they accept our principles," Ashen replied. "No conquests, no subjects. Only equals working toward a common future." Elira smiled. The exact opposite of what Morix would have built. "That's the idea." The Kingmaker hung at his side, its glow now a steady, gentle light. It had been months since Ashen had heard its voice or received visions from Alaric's time. Perhaps its most urgent purpose had been fulfilled, or perhaps it was simply waiting, watching as a new era unfolded. "Do you ever regret it?" Elira asked. "Picking up that rusty blade?" Ashen considered the question, remembering the lonely scavenger he had been, burdened by guilt and without purpose. "No," he said finally. "I don't. Whatever else has happened, at least I'm no longer running from my past." As the sun set over the city, their city, neither Alaric's nor Morix's, but something new, Ashen felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. He wasn't a king in the traditional sense, but he had found his kingdom nonetheless, not in territory or power, but in the community they were building together from the ruins of the past. And if the Kingmaker at his side glowed a little brighter at that thought, well, perhaps even ancient sentient weapons could learn new ways. The rusty blade that had once spoken to a lonely scavenger had found its true purpose not in restoring an empire, but in building something better from its ashes. And Ashen Darrow, once a deserter hiding from his past, had found that sometimes the heaviest burdens become bearable when carried for the right reasons. "Welcome back, Your Majesty," indeed.